Hey there, magical experimenters. This is Taylor Ellwood, and I am so thrilled because today I have one of my favorite people, Soviet Mercedes, here with me on the call. We're doing a fun YouTube video podcast here for you folks, and it's so thrilling to talk with you again. It's been so long, it's been about a year.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, it's been way too long, and what a crazy world and year it has been.
Agreed. I mean, it really has been. I think the last time we talked about wealth magic, and it's kind of interesting because now I'm thinking about the world around us, and I think that what I see more so than ever is like a real need to kind of face the reality of the world around us when we look at our magical work and
Hmm.
our mundane work and how we make all these things come together. So let's start off with talking a bit about what each of us has been doing magically and mundanely in the world around us to kind of manifest our goals and desires and turn things around. You go first, because I know you're always up to interesting stuff.
So, on what mostly has been my focus right now is I actually kind of not took a step back, but kind of dialed down on the magical practices and kind of dialed up on the mundane practice because I feel like a lot of us, being mid-pandemic, kind of realize that regardless of how good your magic is, you still have these external, like you're still subject to the external world, regardless of how much you like or dislike it. Um, so I really took that as an invitation to kind of clean up the mundane practice, the mundane execution, the mundane world around me into how I choose to perceive it and how I choose in participating in it. So that's where I still am. Like, don't get me wrong, there's always magic in my world. There's always a daily practice, but just much, a little bit more smoother, a little bit more softer. And right now, I'm really experimenting and expanding on like really mundane knowledge, education, and stuff. So yeah, and I always have my courses going, and I'm always growing and expanding. But I feel so. What I feel like the pandemic really was an invitation to is how to redefine how we perceive wealth, right? Because like even while I feel like the association with it is mostly like money, 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 which is all cool and it's for sure a part of it, but you'll see that money still like can get you only to a certain extent, and you can still feel miserable when you have a lot of money. So like how does that show up in my life, and how do I want it to show up? So what have you been up to?
Well, so I dialed up my magical work actually because of course, my life blew up. I got a divorce and all that other fun stuff, and so then I had to manifest some things, and I had to manifest them fast, and it was an interesting thing. But I took my time. Like after the divorce, I waited a couple months and just kind of took care of just got my own internal stuff done. And that was the mundane level, was like I just got this job where I drove around delivering food. And it was perfect for me because it gave me lots of time to be in the car and think and figure things out. And I think like when you go through a life change that is not one that you really wanted to go through, but you kind of have to just do it, having that kind of space to work in can be a great thing. And that was the mundane level of that, because I used that as a way to sort through things and go a little crazy for a while, which was good because then I could, as I like to say, sometimes you have to go insane in order to find your sanity again. And I did. But then after that, I started upping my game by doing a ton of work with the planet Saturn. And I ended up manifesting a job where I can work anywhere I want to. It's 100% remote. They're never going to go back to the office space. So that's great. And I ended up manifesting a home 2 hours south of Portland, and in a crowded, saturated rental market where like lots of people were moving down here, but I was able to get it in half a week, which is pretty impressive because like nobody really was able to do that. So I kind of had to up my magic game for that. But I also ended up manifesting some new people in my life and making some new friends, got a magical partner I'm working with. So I'm really excited about all of that. And all this kind of came together very nicely. Now, having done all that magical work, now I'm grounding down into the mundane again, because I think there is some truth to what you said. Like there's like, yes, you've got this magical work and you can do a lot with it, but sometimes you have to face the realities. Well, sometimes magic's great for helping you hop from one reality to another. That's basically what I did. I hopped out of a few different realities and found my way to the new reality. As our mutual friend Elizabeth would say, I basically ended up pushing myself into a new timeline, and I would agree with her on that one. Mm-hmm. And then what I've ended up doing since then is really starting to ground into the mundane, figuring out my new writing schedule around the job, figuring out, building a community with people and other things, and scaling back some other activities to focus on these things more. So it's really an exciting time. And I think it ties right in hand with you, because you're talking about like the wealth stuff. And I think that this is where it ties in, is that for me, I've manifested all these changes, and now I'm sitting with, well, what's enough right now? Here's all this magical work I did to manifest a new home, a new job, to manifest some new opportunities and a new community. That's a lot to digest. And there is something to be said for taking some time, both magically and mundanely, to just digest something and actually work with it instead of hopping right to the next thing. And I think I see that a lot in the magical community. And just people in general, where they will hop from one thing to another. Like, oh, I did this. Now I got to move to the next thing. Now I got to move to the next thing. And I'm like, no, you know what? I really just need to digest this for a while. I need to focus on, this is enough for right now. I don't need to add more to my plate. I need to ground into it and accept it and work with it and really focus on manifesting taking the manifestation that I've created and actually building on it a foundation slowly but surely, so that I can get to where I want to go instead of just trying to move on to the next thing. So there is something to be said for knowing when to apply magic, and also knowing when to stop applying magic and actually just be where you're at.
Yeah. And I feel like we have this like little cool group of, connections of people who are kind of finding a healthy in between, where I'm always bitching about like, the mundane world is on like this, this like very masculine go hustle culture, and then you have the spiritual community, which is just this floating heads, completely disconnected from any sense of reality. And then you have like our little group, which is kind of constantly practicing to connect those two, right? And yeah, I think I think you found, like you mentioned, the key to happiness, because I feel it's such a consumerism way, right? To hop constantly to the next, to more and more. Like it's like this filling this endless void or something. While I think there's a huge practice and grounding to be found in recognizing and realizing that what you wished for at some point, you're having that right now, right? Or like what you have right now, you wished for that at some point. So there's this funny meme of a guy, and it says like who got an award, and he's on his phone. It says like the random person nowadays discrediting his goal and already looking for the next goal. And I feel like it's such a hasty like lifestyle, just more, and again you become this floating head still.
Well, it's like cancer, actually. I mean, cancer is basically unrestrained growth. If you look at it, from a health perspective, well, it's the same thing with a person's life, okay, or a business or whatever. Like if they're always going after more, if you're always going after more, you never have time to stabilize what you have, and then you shouldn't be surprised when what you have goes right out the window. And I think a lot of times, people will be either in this hustle culture, or they'll be on the opposite end, but they'll still be doing something similar to that, where it's like, where's the next magical experiments? Where's that next adrenaline hit? Where's that next rush? That's it. How do you integrate what you've already got into you and focus on it and build a very practical foundation that actually allows you to then fully go into those experiences and enjoy them? I mean, certainly I'm continuing to do my magical work, of course, my daily work and things like that. But, I'm sure at some point I'll get to the point where I'll be like, okay, I need to manifest something new. But at that point, I'll already have this foundation in place and I won't be hopping to something else. Instead, I'll be truly manifesting it from a place of, I have enough. I had enough. Now I've gotten to the point where what was enough is no longer enough because there's opportunities here and I want to open the door for those opportunities. So now I'm going to start pulling some more opportunities because I have the bandwidth to handle them.
Absolutely. And you'll see it in everything, right? Like whether it's the way we consume food, whether it's workout, if you just keep going, you'll actually damaging your nervous system more than, right? Like if I'm constantly eating chocolate, I will need constantly more, rather if I, obtain for whatever amount of time, then I could actually enjoy it. Same for workout. If I'm lifting all the time, my muscles never get to heal. Like I'm creating a ceiling for myself. And I think it's, and this is, I feel like language is never like enough. It never substitute, like it doesn't cover it all, but it's by lack of better wording, I feel like the duality of holding what you have, it being enough, being grateful, which is one of my biggest practices always, while desiring more, not from a sense of like, I need it, this like obsessive, like survival, but like, I have what I have, which is beautiful, and I'm acknowledging it constantly. And maybe there's more, but like from a desire, it's cool to have an extra or to experience new things, but not from this like grind, must.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good point, because I mean, you keep grinding and at some point you grind yourself down to powder because you no longer have that ability to handle things. You push yourself too hard. It's interesting because I was reading a book this last fall, winter, called Wintering, which is really helpful for me during some rough times, because this was a book all about how do you navigate those moments of your life where you're wintering, where you're going through tough times and where you're having to retreat and rest and kind of find yourself again. And I think that goes hand in hand with this too, like in a very practical way. If you're always hustling, if you're always doing stuff, you're never really giving yourself time to integrate, but you're also never really giving yourself time to rest. And as you said, you hit a ceiling, like you're lifting those weights, but you don't give yourself time for your muscles to heal, then you're only getting so far and you're actually doing yourself more damage than you're actually getting.
Yeah. And now I lost my train of thoughts. No, actually, yes to everything you said. And and I feel like, and this is what I always bitch about, again, like people who know me know I bitch about this, where it's like, we are completely disregarding our biology and chemistry, like constantly wanting the next dopamine rush. Because anything that, I will always say, any type of feeling is now considered bad, right? Like we want these rushes of bliss and happiness, sure, but anything other that's not that is now considered bad. And I think we're doing a huge disservice to our humanness and our nervous system to constantly wanting to move away. And that's why we have a pandemic and epidemic of, depression and everyone burned out, because we are not consciously sitting with ourselves and with our humanness.
Yeah, well, I think it's a huge reason why people have gone through some major changes in their lives, because it's kind of, it forces you to, this kind of experience forces you to just suddenly sit with, okay, here you thought everything was great in your life, but really it wasn't. And we're going to blow the door off. And now all of a sudden you're faced with just this reality of, no, things weren't that great. And that happiness you thought you had, you really didn't have it. You were just settling for something. And it becomes a trap then, a gilded cage.
And I feel like for many people, the pandemic and the lockdown in any shape or form was, in hindsight at least, a huge gift, right? Because all the external distractions and the flashy lights got forcibly shut down. So where everyone wanted, normally it's just like, oh, distraction, and you can constantly keep yourself occupied with all sorts of things. Those were not available anymore right now. So now what? Now it's just you and you.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I guess And I guess the interesting thing to add to that is that how people distracted themselves is with consumeristic shopping. Like, you know, they buy the video game consoles, new books, whatever. I didn't mind when people were buying the book themselves because that helped me. But, you know, all the same, it's just kind of an interesting thing where it's like, you know, at the same time, there's at a certain point that only gets you so far. Okay, I bought this new thing. Well, one time I would have gotten that dopamine hit, but now my system's so stressed and burned out that I don't even care. It's just another thing. Great. Now I got to deal with it. And it was interesting because when you have to get rid of all your things, like I basically got to the point where I only had 20 boxes to my names, and that was it. Like I got rid of half my book collection, all this other stuff. It really forced me to reevaluate and be like, well, what does really matter to me? What is it I really want? Okay, this is what I want. Now I've got it. You know, this is enough for right now. And I'm just going to rest in it and enjoy it and allow it to saturate into my life, because if I try to push it any further, then I'll just be back right where I was.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that a lot of times people don't know when to step back from the extreme limits. And admittedly, as a person who can go to some very interesting extremes, as I think you can too, we both know where that can get us at times.
And it's good to know, and it's good to, and I would say, like, there's something to be said to pushing your limits in a safe way, right? Like there's something to be said to, like, climb a mountain and feel your lungs fucking burst. You're good. You're not dying while it absolutely fucking feels like it, right? And everything's no, turn back. This is horrible. We're dying. No, we're not. But yes, it feels like it. But I feel, as someone who's just moved across ocean, and something that caught my mind, what you said, like, you know, when you did the DoorDash, for me, like, being in a car or being in a transportation is for me a very magical place, because it's in between two places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very processing. So I can imagine how that, like, when you say, like, hey, you're not in the drama, you're not anywhere else, so you're kind of like in this like neutral ground, basically.
Yeah, it was a very liminal space. Because I
Yeah.
was constantly going from one place to another. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up food at Chipotle. Then I'm going to take this food over to this person here or to that person there or whatever. And then I'm going to go on to the next thing. And it was, and the time would fly by. And sometimes I'd listen to music and sometimes I wouldn't. But it was just like, okay, I didn't really have to interact with people. I mean, I would say hello to the, you know, the people at the restaurants or whatever. I didn't really interact with the customers. I was just like, yeah, this is great. It was just a nice, quiet place to rest and relax and think and reflect and figure things out. And you know, it was necessary. And I would actually say that to anyone, like, you need to get away from something, do delivery driving for a while, do something else along those lines. Like you may be in a really miserable place, but at least you'll be in a place where you're forced to think about things, but you still have to do something else the entire time.
And I can imagine that just having that limited contact, but still contact with the humans, what, not being completely isolated, also might like contribute to just like, hey, still around humans. I don't have to interact with them, but
it was interesting because with the pandemic, I basically was isolated for the most part for about a year. I didn't really see any of my friends.
mm-hmm.
And so when I suddenly was like, oh, now I'm living at my one friend's place and I've got to find work. And I got into DoorDash literally the week after I got divorced, or basically decided to move out and everything. I was like, all right, I got to make money, you know, I mean, I'm making some, but I've got to stabilize this just in case. And so I started literally that Monday and did my first delivery, and then, you know, really stepped it up by like that Wednesday. And it was interesting because then I started to re-socialize too, because it's like interacting with these people. And it wasn't like deep conversations, it was very simple things, but it was an interesting process. And I think it actually speaks to this notion of like the mundane work, that sometimes we have to reintegrate ourselves into a situation. We have to do it slowly, dip our toes in. I was like, oh, well, this is how I socialize with people. It's small talk, but it works right now. And that's what I can do. I don't want to go into deep pontifications about spirits and other things like that anyway.
Yeah. Like there's a natural flow to it, and there's a time and place for deep things, and just for enjoying the simplicity of just like superficial conversations.
There is. Although, like, you and I will never have superficial conversations between us. Let's just be honest here.
Let's just be honest. So what did you find? Did you find that you changed up or created a very different routine from like pre-pandemic?
I mean, I would say that my routine changed a lot during the pandemic. I mean, first I was working a job where, I was going to work, and then it was, oh, you're working from home. And, that presented opportunities. Then it was, I'm leaving that job and I'm going to write full time at home. And then it was, well, I screwed my life up somewhat. So I'm going to deal with that and all the consequences of those things. And then it was, okay, now I'm going to drive around for a while and do this. And then finally, it was back to now I'm at home and I'm working at another job where I can work from home, but I'm not living with anybody else. I've got my own space. I'm doing my own thing. And I have people that I see, but it's really kind of refreshing because it's like I've gone through this entire alchemical metamorphosis, if you will, this transformation where I went from one thing that I knew all the way to another place. And it's like I spiraled. Time is a spiral. So it's like, okay, I'm up here, and then I go down, and I'm like kind of in the same place, but I'm not. It's
Mhm.
changed. It's different. And I think that that's a really transformative aspect of magic that people sometimes forget about, that we have these cycles and we'll do this magical work, and then we'll be like, oh, you're here, but now you're here. And I'm curious, what do you think of that idea? Do you see that applying to your life at all? Like where you kind of find that there's like a spiral aspect in a way, like you're kind of in the same place, but you're not?
Yeah, and I feel, and I would refer. First of all, you and I started bonding because you are, until I know right now, still the only one talking about time magic. And back when I learned about your work, I was in time, and I was like trying to get a grasp, or like something was like I needed to click, right? So that's how we like
That is how
started
we met.
connecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that's almost like basically the seasons of life, right? Like, yeah, the sea, obviously we have winter coming again, but no winter looks the same, whether that's by external forces like the weather, or the tree in my front yard versus like where I am in life. But there is an element to it that keeps returning.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. And I mean, I think, like, where were you like a year ago? I think you were in Europe still, right?
Yes.
You were still
So
like,
this is over. I had in August last year, I bought a big ass motherfucking car, like a baller M4 BMW, and I started just traveling from country to country. I enjoyed my liminal time on the Autobahn, driving 144 miles an hour, and just because the world was closed, so like, and it's legal there, by the way. No one get upset. Um, right? Like,
oh my
she's a
gosh,
horrible
bro. Soviet Mercedes.
144. Who drives 144?
That's right.
Um, and I was, whereas prior to pandemic, I was constantly traveling. And I mean constantly. I wouldn't be in one place for longer than a week. And I'm talking worldwide. I would go Latin America, North America, Europe, all over Europe. So first my world got real small because it just confined to one country in Europe. And then I was exploring like, hey, what does routine look like when being in one place? Because I have a very significant routine when I'm traveling, but what does it look like when you don't have all these external factors and places that you're needing to be with? So I really enjoyed that. I like to look at my life as experiments. So I really tried on different things. I tried on different routines, like pre-described, where people go like, oh, you need to be, miracle morning, where you get up at 5 a.m. And that's not for me at all. But I'm also not a night person. So it was really like just constantly coming to self and being like, does this work for me? And not just one day, like trying things for 2 months, right? Like, because we all have our own season even in cycle as women, right? For a month. So like, how does that work? So I really took that time to experiment. Um, Thoroughly enjoyed it, found deeper layers within myself, found shit in myself that I thought I was, fixed and done, which wasn't the case. And now I could spend more time in like, processing, healing, grounding. So I absolutely thrived, and am grateful for how that world, how it showed up for me.
That's interesting because, you brought up the routines, and I think that's like a great example of where the magic can meet the mundane, because, routines are rituals of sorts, right? They may not be overtly magical, but like when I brush my teeth in the morning, I'm definitely, it can be a magical working if you are very intentional about it and you know how to weave it into play. But then there's also just the fact that the routine in and of itself kind of creates its own stability. And I think for
Yes.
me, what was interesting is that in all the things that were happening, I did switch from routine to routine to routine. Like when I was doing DoorDash, it was all right, I'm going to get out the door by like 10:30 and do the lunch rush. And I'm going to drive until about 6 or 7 at night. And I'm going to be doing this for basically 5 to 6 days a week, because it was, it's just kind of like I needed to bring some money in, and it was a pretty involved process. And of course, I had to factor in that money had to go toward the car for gas,
Mhm.
car repair, and all the other stuff, while doing that. So it was a very different routine. Now I have this routine where I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to do my Qigong, and then I'm going to write for an hour, and then I'm going to start work, and then I'm going to work on stuff throughout the day for work. But while I'm working on stuff throughout the day for work, I'm also going to find where I can slip in things like uploading videos to my channels or uploading videos to my classes or whatever else, because, that's busy, easy work that can be done while I'm still doing the other work. And then after that, I'm going to do my evening ritual, and I'm going to get together with people, or I'm going to write, or whatever else. So, these routines changed around, and I'm still figuring out the routines right now, because I'm in this Wally new space, and because I've got somebody in my life now. So of course there's the routine of that. Like I haven't been in a new relationship in over 10 years. So like that's its own interesting thing too, discovering those kinds of things. And I know you got married recently, so you've got that aspect of probably discovering what that routine looks like with that special
Yes.
person.
And then finding, because basically you then have two people and two different routines, and that creates kind of like a third entity, a third routine itself, right? So like how does that fluidly fit into each other? And what really was a thing for me, because again I keep hammering about like the mundane stuff, is how much we almost like keep ourselves delusional in thinking that everything has to be like this sparkly and motivated experience. And and I remember when I was young and I did not feel like brushing my teeth, I had all these feelings about brushing my teeth, and now I brush my teeth, right? And I don't have any feelings, nor are any feelings required. And
No.
if anything, if I conjure up feelings, it's more of a like attribute to self-care, right? Almost like, because it can become like you can make any routine magical. It becomes almost like this affirmation of self-care and honoring the godly version of your human self, I guess.
Well, that's a great point. And I mean, I would agree with that right there, that like everything doesn't have to be sparkly or whatever else. Like brushing my teeth isn't a sparkly thing. It's I'm cleaning my teeth because I know if I don't take care of them, I'm going to get cavities, then they're going to fall out, and I'm going to have dentures, and it's going to hurt a lot. Well, that's
Yeah.
a great motivation right there for why you would do something. It's preventative health. But
Absolutely.
how many people like to try and dress stuff up and make it something more? Now I see that act of cleaning as like, okay, I'm doing this self-care, and like you said, kind of aligning with that godlike aspect of myself. But I mean, I don't think I need to read anything more into it. And I think that that's also kind of an interesting thing I see sometimes with magical work, where people will take magical work to the extreme of, well, I have to make this so mystical and read so much meaning into it. And it's like, well, why? Why not just simply have the experience in and of itself? And if you find a way to attach it to magical work, then great. We can do that. But do we need to necessarily make it into this elaborate thing when instead we could just take a very realistic look and be like, okay, the reason I'm brushing my teeth is because I want to take good care of myself, and I want to be able to have my teeth for the rest of my life, so that when I'm old and cranky and everything else, I'm still using those teeth instead of dentures. That's a good
And
reason.
Yeah, right. That's good enough. That's good enough in and of itself. I am starting to conclude that people who need to see a very deep meaning in everything, they're almost using it as an escapism of just what is, and of not being able to handle that we don't know everything. Right? Like we don't know why this. Again, one of my biggest annoyance, and I'm not a bitchy person, or well, no, I am, but like,
All right, I want you to get on that soapbox, girl. Get on that soapbox.
like this whole it turned into a coping mechanism. I had that car accident because I wasn't supposed to have this and this, or you just had a car accident because someone else wasn't paying attention.
Or because you weren't paying attention.
Or because you weren't paying attention, right? Or you stubbed your toe because you were just a little too sleepy. It wasn't to, test your emotions or whatever the fuck. Like, not everything is constantly this deep. And I feel that's a very leftover view of Christianity, right? That everything has a meaning, that everything has a reason. And if you don't know it, God works in mysterious ways. And I feel that a lot of occultism just still adapted that mindset, just put a different jacket around it.
Or same for New Age thought too. I mean, that's another example right there. Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of truth, but sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. It doesn't have to be phallic. It doesn't have to be anything else. It doesn't have, the whole Freudian thing. But it's true. I mean, sometimes things are just the way they are. I mean, it is worth it to know when to read deep meaning into stuff. Like, there are moments where that can be worthwhile, especially if you're intentionally doing magical work around things and you start to see certain events and other things line up and you're like, okay, this is confirmation, this is working, things are coming together. But you do it all the time. At a certain point, it's like, well, when do you really know that you're actually doing something magical then?
Yes.
When do
You're
you really,
flatlining.
right, you're flatlining, you don't really know. And so you don't have a way to measure it out or have a metric in place, and you've lost touch with reality at that point. And it is interesting because, yeah, there is this sense of like, I have a deep sense to know. And as I always say is, challenge what you know by discovering what you can learn. Well, how do you do that? By recognizing you don't know everything, and that even when you think you know something, a lot of times what you know is really just part of the picture and could be inaccurate.
Yes. And one thing, and you and I talked about that in the past year, especially, that one thing that I recommend to every occultist is, at one point, quit all fucking magic and just see how much is, first of all, just belief systems, which is just, neurons firing off neurons, versus mundane actual work, right? And execution, versus what was the magical sprinkle on things. Just to have a proper baseline, to know your base. And you'll see it. Spiritual community. Oh boy, everything has to have meaning. Every Mercury masturbate and Gatorade means everything. And, my credit card didn't work. No, your credit card didn't work because it didn't have enough credit on it.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with the planets.
If your computer broke down, your computer broke down because it broke down. Mercury didn't reach out and say, oh yeah, I'm going to screw with you today.
And again, that's a very, very Christian-like concept, right? That external authorities decide how your life is going. And you're kind of like just victim to them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've certainly done enough spirit work. Well, I will say that sometimes you can enter into arrangements and bargains and stuff like that. And that's certainly worthwhile to note, but that there's also a very real difference between that and being like, well, all right, this is happening. And because, like when I worked with Saturn as a planetary energy, this summer, and really with the entity of Saturn, even like the old Titan Cronus, really, it was interesting because it was a very purposeful working, and I could see where he was coming into play. Exactly. And there were certain variables that fell outside of even what I knew, that when I discovered certain other things later on, I was like, oh, that's another way that was showing up. And I could read deep meaning into that, but I was also purposely doing magical work around it. But when I stopped doing magical work around it, those things slowed down and then kind of went away. And it's like, okay, and it was interesting because like I said myself is that, you know, when I first when I first, you know, got divorced and left, the first month or two, I didn't do any magic at all. I was like, no, if I do magic right now, that is absolutely the worst time because I don't know what I want. I've just gotten out of a situation. I have to figure my life out. I need to spend some time grieving and letting things
Mm,
go and everything else. And I just need to be very mundane for a while.
that's potent. Yeah, that's good.
It's very potent, but that's a good example going back to that baseline too, because by having that baseline when I was ready to do magical work, that's when I started to see. And it was interesting because I did a magical working to help a friend land a job. And my first magical working wasn't even for me, it was for somebody else because it was like, I know I can do that and help that person. But then
Yeah.
the next one I did get something I wanted, but then I realized I didn't want it. So it was like, okay, well, back to the drawing board, and maybe I should hold off a bit longer. So I waited a bit longer before going back into doing things. And I think, again, that's a
And it's
very,
uncomfortable, right?
it
But
is
very
uncomfortable,
necessary.
but very necessary. Yes, very necessary. Knowing when to put a stop to stuff and get that baseline and be like, yep, here I am in mundane world, and I'm not necessarily messing around with stuff because I know that messing around with stuff is actually going to probably make things worse instead of better. That's a good thing. And it's a real limit, but it's amazing how many people won't do it. Like, oh, I've got to always be doing something. I've always got to be doing this or that or whatever else. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I was still doing like some internal work and meditation, but that was more about self-care. It wasn't
Yeah,
magical work.
yeah,
It was about like, okay, I got to figure some stuff out in here. And that was good stuff to do, but it wasn't overtly magical. It wasn't to get results or anything like that. And I think, again, like it's good to stop it for a while or to shift focus too. Like it doesn't always have to be about magic for results. It could be like, okay, like now, for example, I'm down here in Eugene and I'm starting to work with a magical community. Well, now I can just work with that magical community and we can learn together and you know, have discussions and do some magical work, but without necessarily shooting for concrete results. We're just learning and getting to know each other and discovering what that looks like.
yeah, yeah. And instead of constantly trying to patch life with magic.
Right. Well, and I mean, you can't patch life all the time. At a certain point, you just have to accept that life is going to catch up and slap you down. And it's
Because
not a
we
bad
have
thing.
no, because we have a mundane thing, right? If I have a wound, I'll have to actually just wait until it heals.
Right. Or, you know, if I've gotten myself into circumstances and I know and I can see where I got myself into them, I better figure that out and get it fixed and resolved. And I can't just try and magic my way out of it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, mundane reality catches up and it doesn't spare the rod.
And I feel like that's like the beauty of of an occult practice, that it's a extra sprinkle of, you know, this extraness that you would normally not have, but on something that would be okay without it, right? Like I said, right, there's a mundane aspect to everything. If you're looking for a house, you'll actually have to look for a house, right, on the mundane plane. You know, call landlords or on Zillow.com or something. You can't
Yeah.
just do magic on magic.
Yeah, nobody's going to come knocking on your door and be like, hey, guess what? Here's that house you've been looking for. You're going to have
Or
to
that
actually go
hot
out
chick.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, I've heard that you wanted to become a professional PlayStation player, and I hunted you down and I found this door, and here we are, and you're gonna get like the lifetime, you know, deal contract for the rest of your life to just play PlayStation. No, you'll have to actually do things. You'll have to actually be good at PlayStation to begin with.
Yeah, you'll have to get a Twitch channel. You'll have to, you know, you'll have to get good at marketing and things. I think it's interesting too, because a lot of times people will say like, I want this specific result. And I'm like, okay, great. And are you ready for the consequences and all the other things that come with that? Like if I go and I publish a book, I can publish a book and that's great. But if I don't know how to market that book or do any of those other things, that doesn't mean the book sells. It just means the book is out there on Amazon. Okay, that's nice. It's the same thing with anything else. Like you have to be willing to do the work and set things up and put everything out there and set it up in such a way that people are like, oh, yeah, this is what I know how to get this now.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, like, you know, as the money witch, what for me it really translates in. First of all, I can work. Like I can work. I have scrubbed toilets. I've done everything, and I have no problem with it. I can grind. I have no problem with it. But now I don't have to anymore. And sometimes I hear my accountant. He's like, "How do you make so much money by doing so little?" I'm like, "I don't know. It just makes no sense." It just is. And I think that's the sprinkle of magic, right? We put on it to kind of amplify on the fundamental base that we've created.
Well, and if you happen to have a fundamental understanding of human psychology, that doesn't hurt either.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Understanding, then there we go, like the chemistry, biology, human psychology, understanding, and even what I would say, even understanding economy and politics to a certain degree, to understand what is happening around you, why we have all these distractions, and what these distractions are supposed to do.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a good point. And I've done it all too. I mean, I've scrubbed toilets. I've worked at all kinds of different types of jobs. Of course, I've done DoorDash now. So that's like another thing on the resume and all that. And I think it's interesting because I think it's a very grounding experience. Like I would say to anybody, go out there and do some jobs that go out there and work food retail for a while, go out there and clean somebody's house, go out there and do some of the stuff that you don't think you want to do like for the rest of your life, because it'll really teach you why you don't want to do it. Like I remember when I moved to the West Coast, I cleaned houses for about a good solid 2 or 3 months. And I'll tell you, that was enough to really like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I've got to get out of this. I've got to,
yeah.
It was great motivation. And there's like, sometimes it's exactly what you need. You want to get to that point where you want to manifest a wealthy life or a life where you can like do whatever you want. Well, find the motivation, be willing to go out there and get your hands dirty for a while, figure some things out, because it'll force you to get creative too.
And absolutely. Yes, yes. And I have found that there is extreme fulfillment to be found in some hard work.
There is.
Doing, mowing the lawn, taking down trees, growing food, like there's nothing like that is such a ancient fulfillment and satisfaction in our body, like nothing compares. And kind of like surviving the odds, walking through the rain and the storm, whatever, like there's something in there that's so potent.
Yeah, well, it's like cooking, is a good example for me. Like there's something so primal about cooking. I love cooking food and making great meals. And it is absolutely one of the most wonderful experiences that you can have. And I think it's interesting, again, because people will be like, well, like I want to eat out all the time. It's like, well, that's great, but maybe pick up the skillet and try some stuff, see how fulfilling that is, like making your own food or like, doing some other kind of work. Like when you really do something that brings you that kind of awareness, it changes your experience because you have a better understanding of what other people go through. And as a result, you might treat them even a bit better than you would otherwise. I know, having worked at a number of different service level jobs over the years, that I always get better service, oddly enough, from people who do that work, because they know, like as soon as like I'm talking to them, they're like, that person sees me, that person knows what it's like, they know.
Absolutely.
And I compare that to people who've never done that kind of work, and you can just tell how they act and like how the service people are like, yeah, I can't do anything overt, but I'm going to find some way to like mess this person's day up a bit just because they're being an ass.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. There's something, it's an enriching experience. And whether that's to create contrast, whether that's to create a deeper awareness, whether it's to create deeper connection, absolutely necessity and absolutely a complement to like your whole life.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that when we look at the blend of magic and mundane, it just seems to me like what we have to do is like find that willingness to get our hands dirty, to know when to stop doing magic sometimes, and to know when to balance the magic out that we're doing with recognizing that we have enough.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah. So tell us about some of your classes and where we can find you online, because I know you're always doing interesting things.
Yeah, so you can mostly find me on meetmeatthebank.com. Most of my classes are on there. I have I have a course called Dom, How to Dominate Life, the Ultimate Dom course. There's a sex worker aspect, like really a BDSM aspect, and there's a how to like get us how to invoke the dominatrix archetype, right? Like stronger sense of boundaries, stronger sense of self, stronger sense of like what you want and your desires and being able to speak on them. Then I have a demon course talking about all the inner demons.
Mm-hmm.
I have the blood codes with Jesse, which is all for women, you know, getting closer in touch with your cycle, but also with how that relates to, you know, how we experience wealth, pleasure, creativity, and all the, like a lot, it's a very mundane one, right? Like a lot of psychology too. And this year I'll be launching a new course, probably called Ridiculously Rich or something like that. And it's going to be, yes, there's going to be money magic, but there's also, again, a lot of like psychology, execution. How do we show up for ourselves? How, you know, how do we assess things in life? And yeah.
I haven't taken one of your courses, the Meet Me at the Bank course. I can safely say to those of you watching that Soviet Mercedes courses are excellent. I mean, I got a lot out of it, and you know, so I highly recommend her work. And you know, you get the Taylor Ellwood seal of approval, such as that is.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. And are you currently doing anything, building anything, working on anything?
Well, I'm still creating courses. I created an emergency magic course that was inspired by my summer and everything. And I was like, you know what? People need to know about that. And I'm actually
Yes.
building a course on how to do book launches on my other video course site. So that's all about a book launch success plan and basically teaching people how to plan out their book launches. So I'm looking forward to launching that soon. And then I'm going to get back and create a planetary magic course. But then in the meantime, I'm almost finished writing my latest fiction book, The Zombie Apocalypse Militia, which is part of the Zombie Apocalypse Call Center series.
Mm-hmm.
And then I am getting ready to work on my next magic book, which is going to be Walking with Elemental Spirits.
Nice. Well done. I'm excited to read and see all of it again.
Yeah, I've managed to put out so far 5 books this year, so this will be book number 6, and it's been such a crazy year that the fact that I got 5 books out is pretty freaking impressive when I think about it.
Yeah.
Like my friends were like, Taylor, like you got 5 books out in the year, like already, like that's like, especially with everything you went through, and you're like being hard on yourself about it. I'm like, I know it's not realistic, but I wanted to write more. But I'm like, yes, I am proud of myself, and I'm almost done with book 6.
Well done. Well done.
So yeah. All right, well, we'll wrap up here. Thank you again for coming on to the show. And people, you want to check out Soviet Mercedes courses, just click the links at the bottom of below the video here in the show notes. And, you know, I highly recommend following her work. She is an amazing magician. And of course, I'm honored to say she is one of the most amazing people I know as a friend as well.
Thank you for having me. And thank you. Thank you.